for introducing me and to Future Campus for the invitation to speak today. It's actually timely for a few reasons. Some people may know September is World Dementia Month. This week in a program run really well by Dementia Australia, it's Dementia Action Week. And then on Sunday, it's World Dementia Day, 21st. So doing a presentation on dementia is timely. It's also timely for, it was only just a couple of weeks ago, this Australian Institute of Health and Welfare announced to Australia that dementia for the first time become the #1 cause of death of Australians. It's been coming close now for a few years. It has been the #1 cause of death of women now for a few years. But with the population ageing, and most things that cause dementia are ageing related, finally it's past ischemic heart disease. And that's, well, it's testament really also to how good our public health is, and in terms of our medical services. People are living into longer and longer ages, and their various conditions, if not being cured, are becoming managed. And so a young person today can quite legitimately expect to live into their late 80s. A young woman today should reach their late 80s. The bad news is, unless we come up with a really good treatment, there's a really good chance that they'll have dementia and probably spend a lot of their later life probably looking after people with dementia as well too. So it's really is a really important health issue. So somewhere about 440,000 or so people have dementia in Australia currently. So that's about 90,000 new cases a year. Certainly a big problem, and it costs a lot. And it's one of these things about this amazing change in our demography that's going on. I'm from the Wicking Centre, just very briefly. We got going around 2008. That was myself. I was a neuroscientist by background. I was running a school of medicine at the time. And then my good colleague, Professor Andrew Robinson, was a professor of aged care nursing. He was more of a social scientist, and we got on very well, and over coffee, or it could have been beer, who knows, but we decided it'd be a good thing to try to come together and look at various areas where we could work together to try and do something about dementia, because even back then in the 2000s, clearly it was a growing problem. And we were able to get going really with some fantastic core funding from the John and Janet Wicking Trust, which is at that time was held by ANZ bankers, now held by equity trustees, which allowed us to do things in a more sort of programmatic basis. We often describe ourselves as having a social mission and an academic mission. Really, the social mission largely resolves around trying to make the world a better place for people with dementia, and to support people who care for those people as well too. But on top of that, we have this, of course, standard academic mission, which is trying to do research and teaching of the highest possible quality. And largely our themes that direct what we do, mostly around research, but also in teaching, is around the prevention, cause and care of people with dementia. We've grown substantially since those early days. We're sort of equivalent to an academic school nowadays. And one of the principles we had when we were recruiting people to come and work with us within the centre is that everybody had to commit to working together. So we had lots of experience in our own academic lives of people working in silos around their particular disciplines. And dementia was, in fact, one of those. Really nationally, internationally, there wasn't really much work that went on between, say, the hard sciences, the laboratory-based sciences, and then in the social science area, and between different kinds of disciplines. So if you came to work in the Wicking Centre, you had to figure out ways of working together. And what I'm going to talk mostly about today is one of the flowers of that sort of approach, which has been our massive open online courses, or MOOCs, but also informs what we do in other educational spaces that have grown over the years. We now have formal undergraduate courses around dementia care, and more recently a whole postgraduate program in this area, and a range of other Commonwealth-supported short courses. And I'll talk about how all these things are interrelated. So why did we think about starting a MOOC? I'll take you back to the early 2010s, the late 2000s, early 2010s, and there really was a hue and cry about the quality of aged care in Australia. People might remember the famous Four Corners report, Who Cares? that talked to a number of people who worked in the aged care industry and family carers and so forth. And it was really quite clear that the whole sector was struggling to provide good, not high quality care, just good quality care would have been probably, an ideal target at that time. And then, of course, out of that exposure, if you like, came the Royal Commission into aged care quality and safety. And it really, even now, it's still a strange scenario. For example, if you were unfortunate enough to develop some kind of cancer, it would just, this is the, I guess, the analogy I draw with aged care. So if you were to develop some kind of cancer, you would expect to go to some sort of public, well-supported outpatient clinic. But what if you went to that clinic and you were surrounded by nurses and doctors who didn't know anything about cancer? The same is really true about aged care, specifically about dementia, because 60 to 70%, probably higher, of people who end up, for example, in residential aged care have dementia. But you would struggle, perhaps unfortunately even to this day, to find too many people with specific training or education in that area. And there's my friend Andrew Robinson, and he was publishing a lot on this particular issue. He would look at family carers, he would look at support workers of various kinds, and he would even look at health professionals, nurses through to doctors and allied health practitioners. And none of these groups really had a level of knowledge about dementia in order to provide the best quality care. So we thought this is something we could potentially do something about. And then we thought about how we would approach that issue. So around that same time, the AI frenzy today, in the early 2010s, it was the MOOC frenzy, and MOOCs were going to disrupt and transform higher education. Well, they didn't really do that, but the concept was quite good. This is the idea of democratisation of knowledge. Why can't we have educational offerings that get to as many people as possible, that are broadly accessible and free? And this is why they were called massive open online courses. And some very famous platforms you've probably heard about, edX, Coursera, Udacity, all of these emerged out of this at the time. Bit of a race to develop as many MOOCs as could possibly be created in a huge number of disciplines across a number of universities. Now, it didn't really exactly do that, but the approach to us resonated, and we thought, well, okay, this is something we want to do. We want to get to as many people as possible with something free that a broad group of people with different educational backgrounds would be able to access and find the best evidence-based knowledge and be able to understand that and potentially use that in their approach to care. The interesting, note about MOOCs these days is that I'm not sure there's too many MOOCs left in the world, really, because in fact, if you look at those large platforms, pretty much nothing they offer is for free much anymore. And a consequence of that are their courses are not as massive as the good old days either, except in some very specific areas. Courses about AI are very popular. But in the broad sweep of MOOCs, many of these really don't fit the criteria anymore. So we decided to develop the Understanding Dementia Massive Open Online Course, or Understanding Dementia MOOC, and around 2011, 2012. And that was about putting together some capacity we had within the centre, asking friends and colleagues who worked in aged care, through academic experts and health professionals, all to come together to help to develop this particular course. In dementia, this was followed in 2016 by a smaller MOOC called the Preventing Dementia MOOC, and this had a particular focus around dementia risk, because this was also a time where we were beginning to understand, well, of course, ageing is the most important risk factor, but there are all these other life course risk factors that seem to have a role as well too. So we needed to educate people about that. Because certainly there was a lot of snake oil out there in terms of dementia risk reduction as well too. And our goal again was to make this accessible, that if you can go on Facebook, then you can come and do our MOOC. If you've got, vet education, or you left in year 10, you should be able to do that MOOC as much as, somebody with more specialised knowledge, a geriatrician or neurologist or nurse specialist of some kind. So we spent a lot of time trying to work out how that course might work, what the overall arc or story of those MOOCs should be. Of course, being academics as well too, we wanted to build a system where we could do a lot of research so we can understand what people think about dementia, how well the MOOC works, and how we might do things in the future to try and improve aged care. So there's some examples of some of the publications that have arisen out of undertaking the MOOC. So nowadays, we have a completion rate that hovers between 30 and 40%. Now, if you're running a university course, that would be horrific attrition. But if you're in the MOOC world, that's a spectacular success because it was looked at a number of years ago, and really for most MOOCs would struggle to have a completion rate in single digits. 5 to 7% was fairly common. People we were getting to, though, were very different. It was a different group of people to what MOOCs normally go to. Most MOOCs essentially are taken up by young adults who are trying to learn something about a subject, potentially to advance their career. And so MOOCs around IT, for example, statistics, running Excel, all those sorts of technical skills, they tend to be quite popular. Whereas largely our demographic profile were adults, particularly people in their 40s to 50s and then older again. So we have the Understanding Dementia MOOC and the Preventing Dementia MOOC, and we've been running these now for some time. They are updated as the evidence changes out there, and we learn some new things about quality dementia care. We make sure that we put material in that relates to that. Again, our target is to be as wide as possible. Family carers, as Stephen mentioned, through to aged care workers. You can be an aged care worker in Australia. You can do your Certificate 3 and actually learn nothing about dementia, and then you can go straight into your job, where most of your job is actually looking after people with dementia. It's nuts, and maybe that'll change. Maybe there'll be something mandatory in that area in the next couple of years. But we wanted to get particularly to aged care support workers who are doing the hands-on work. And of course, health professionals. A lot of health professionals don't actually get a lot of dementia content often in their undergraduate or postgraduate degree that led to that qualification, because most health professional education is what I describe as largely historically bound. We keep teaching the same things to our doctors and nurses and allied health practitioners, and so making the space for an important health area like conditions associated with being older is quite difficult. But we are finding more and more health professionals are getting involved now in aged care and in various ways looking after people with dementia. So we thought they'd be a particularly important target as well. It's interesting too that predominantly it's women who do our MOOCs as well too, and that probably reflects a lot of things, but probably in particular that women tend to be the ones who end up either in the unpaid caring role or in some sort of professional caring role as well too. So probably is largely reflective of the caring reality. We try and make the content as engaging as possible. So over the years, we've tried a number of different things, a bit of gamified learning. We use quizzes, infographics, all sorts of things to try and make it resonate, I suppose, for the people who access the course. What we've found along the way, though, really is that in terms of the content, what bits of the content may well be compelling, it's really people learning and hearing to people with lived experience. So we actually now have quite a lot of content that relates to people with dementia telling their story, and then sometimes also their proximal carers as well too. And that, I think, has been really important. The other thing we didn't really anticipate was, though, the social learning dimension. So we have discussion topics often in our MOOCs. And so people come on there, they might introduce themselves or talk about their situation or whatever. And that, I think, actually is an important element of their success, because, what's been related to us is that people feel much less alone. They learn something from what other people contribute towards the MOOC and those discussion topics, but also they don't feel so alone in their particular caring environment. And at the moment, we've done a big revision of the Understanding Dementia MOOC, which gets released on Monday as well too, and we're adapting versions of these MOOCs into other languages. We have a very large migrant workforce in aged care in Australia in particular, so we're looking at some of the languages that are probably going to be useful there. and addressing, again, this problem I think we've got with health professional student education. We're doing versions of these MOOCs that will be for medical students or nursing students or allied health students as well. This is what the old version of the MOOC currently looks like, and it basically has 3 modules. Just to give you an idea of how we went about the design of the content, and we argued about this a lot, and we argued about what the golden threads or arc of the MOOC should be. And the arc of the MOOC really is that dementia is a progressive and degenerative condition. You will go through stages with this condition, and you need to think about how you might configure care appropriately to somebody who might be an early or a middle or a late stage. And so to do that, we have a module on the brain. And so it's just, not only the biggest course on probably dementia, but it's probably the biggest course on neuroscience. So we're trying to teach people a bit about the brain and the nervous system, then how that's affected by some of the major diseases that lead to dementia. Second module is more really about clinical management. We touch also a bit on risk and what you might expect might be the difference between normal aging and dementia. And then the third module sort of brings it all home, really, because the focus here is on the person with dementia, and again, how we can configure the best type of care so we can give them the best quality care as well too. And I've mentioned some of those things there about what we do within the MOOCs. We are actually very video heavy these days. People like a bit of content, like a bit of infographics, a bit of text, that I don't mind, as long as you don't have too much of that. What, again, think works really well in this system that we've got is to have a lot of video, really good high quality video content. And also what we find again is that there's some of the videos will be about information. There's an example of me and my colleague Anna talking about the brain. Some of it will be about clinical management. This is from Blair Adamszewski, who's in the new version of the Understanding Dementia MOOC, talking about clinical management. But the bit that people really, really like is the video content that involves the lived experience. So talking to carers or the carer with the person with dementia together as well too. And we think that really probably these MOOCs look a little bit like a documentary with a few other sort of educational bits sort of stuck on it as well too. And for that, we're very grateful to our team, which includes some very talented videographers. We try and do a fair bit of research around the MOOC as we go along. This is just an example of trying to figure out how people learn about dementia. So this is a scale called the Dementia Knowledge Assessment Scale. It's a 50-point scale. Ideally, the people looking after somebody with dementia would be close to the top. We have scores around 50, but we had a look at the people who are coming into the MOOC with different educational backgrounds, different levels of education, also what their experience with dementia might be, whether they care for somebody with dementia, they've had dementia education, or they actually, work in dementia. And basically, the more exposure you've got to dementia and the better educated you are, the higher your score on this, what we call the DCAS, and before you do the MOOC. And then all of these groups fundamentally benefit from undertaking the MOOC when we measure the same thing after the MOOC. And in fact, the people who learn the most are the ones who have the less exposure, as you could imagine, but even people with relatively low levels of education do improve quite dramatically. Our second MOOC relates to dementia risk. So this is a kind of an exciting area really of dementia research currently. Aging is the most important risk factor. It's what we call a non-modifiable risk factor because there's not a lot you can do about aging, but we are fairly confident there's at least 14 factors that will play a role in what we call modifiable risk. And your exposure to these risk factors seems also to be important in a life course fashion as well too. So, for example, the more educational attainment you have earlier in life, the less chance you have of developing dementia later in your life. Then there's a whole suite of factors that sit around midlife, and then a smaller number again in later life. The education one's one that's always fascinated me because I always thought that would be a great sort of university marketing tool, is, come and do our course is not just 3 years, it's 4 years long, and you will gain, extra cognitive reserve and good brain health for the longer you spend at university. But nobody's picked up on that quite yet. So our second MOOC is all about that. It's really a MOOC, like our other MOOC taught a lot of neuroscience. We thought that was a useful thing. This MOOC teaches actually in an accessible way a lot about epidemiology and risk, which we thought was actually pretty a useful thing when along comes like a pandemic, like the COVID-19 pandemic, because people broadly have a pretty bad understanding of risk in populations and so forth. And again, a lot of nonsense that's promulgated out there. This is the core academic teams, is how we tend to approach MOOCs, is we have a core group of enthusiastic people who hopefully won't cry too much as the deadlines start to get a bit closer. That's the late Dr. Marie Farrow, who was absolutely an expert in dementia risk and dementia prevention, and then Shannon and David as well too. But again, like our other MOOCs, what we find is we get a lot of buy-in, free content from our colleagues across universities, across Australia and across the world. And we also get a lot of assistance for those people who have lived experience as well. So again, we try and do a fair bit of research on the impact of the MOOC, and the other advantage of doing these kinds of studies, you can get some very large sample numbers that are otherwise would be very hard to recruit in normal health studies. So there's an example of, I think it was across a couple of MOOCs, and the number of responses are of the order of 16,000. So that's quite a large N for a research study. And perhaps the best one I like is actually the 73% agreement, which is I've already applied the knowledge I've gained from the MOOC. So this is hopefully people who have looked at this MOOC, learnt about risk, and potentially learned about their own risk, and then potentially done something about it as well too. So that's what we call health efficacy or dementia risk efficacy. And we've used this approach in a project that we've done particularly around Tasmania, where there's about 14,000 or so people over the age of 50 who are part of this, basically a brain health program to try and get people to develop this sense of dementia risk efficacy. And our sort of our knowledge base for that is using the Preventing Dementia MOOC. We have other tools as well too, but the Preventing Dementia MOOC is very useful. And this is a program, hopefully it's gone 5 years in Tasmania, it does a pretty good job, and we're looking at ways we might be able to extend that nationally. In terms of enrolments across the two dementia MOOCs, it's somewhere just over 700,000 or so people, and across all of our MOOCs, it's about 60% are Australia and 40% from other countries. Here are some other MOOCs that we've developed. Stephen mentioned the multiple sclerosis MOOC. That was largely done by our colleagues in the Menzies Research Institute. We supported it, and that's been very successful in its own right. But we've got one that we developed on traumatic brain injury. And just this year, we released two new ones, one on Parkinson's disease and also another one on motor neuron disease. But it's a similar story across all of them in terms of completion rates and the proportions of the learners who are in Australia. People seem to like the MOOC. So in these ratings sites like Class Central, the Understanding Dementia MOOC is number 5, I think, in the top 100 MOOCs of what are now tens of thousands of MOOCs that exist out there, and the Preventing Dementia MOOC is number 24. And if you get a little bit more specific, you can look in the health and medicine category, 7 out of the top 10 MOOCs by user ratings are from the University of Tasmania. That probably doesn't project very well, but this just shows the numbers that we've got from across the world. Essentially, we've got pretty much every country in the world, sometimes with a few, sometimes with a lot. We've done traditionally very well in Commonwealth countries, New Zealand, Great Britain, Canada, and it's starting now to expand a bit in Southeast Asia and particularly through Africa. When we started our MOOCs, we were thinking about, well, how do we get this reach into the MOOCs? And in those, what we call the good old days, which were not that long ago, with social media, you could spend actually not a lot of money to get tremendous reach. So we actually use Facebook, paid Facebook marketing a lot in the early days, but we've essentially stopped doing that now because largely people find out about the MOOC through word of mouth. We ask people if they finish the MOOC, please to tell their friends, colleagues and family about the opportunities. And we also see some sharing by professional organisations of various kinds. There are dementia organisations in most countries nowadays as well too. So everybody sort of shares the opportunity. So we don't really need to spend any money on marketing anymore. This is just from this year when we did the Understanding Dementia MOOC ahead of our revamp. It gives you an idea of the numbers across Australia, and then there's the top 10 countries. Again, done very well in New Zealand over the years, and some emerging countries where it's starting to spread now, like India. And I mentioned countries throughout Africa, which has been very interesting. Nigeria and South Africa have always been pretty strong, but Kenya, many of these countries where if English isn't the first language, it might be the second language as well too. Big question we get asked sometimes about how we sustain the MOOCs. Really, a lot of our capacity to do this came from this funding we had from philanthropy, from the Wicking Trust, and that's why we called the Wicking Centre. That was sort of the deal that we made that was related to that funding. They helped us do a lot of things. In particular, they helped us fund the development of our own learning management system in which the MOOCs are based. When we got started, we had to jerry-rig the university learning management system to look like a MOOC. That was not very as successful as we had hoped, and we were always nervous about the whole thing falling over. So we started from scratch and developed our own system, and now we actually use that across the university for a variety of other different sort of educational things as well too. We do offer paid certificates. These are the ones that are probably more useful for health professionals claiming their CPD. So there's a lot more detail about the individual components of the MOOC. Donations, of course, is important, but probably really why the university tolerates us and tolerates us keep doing more work in this area, they're actually making a lot of money because it's actually the main pathway for students to come into our undergraduate and postgraduate degrees. So we've got many thousands of students now in those degrees, and they're the same people as do our MOOCs, largely women in their 40s and 50s, pretty much 99.9% of it doing part-time. So almost no full-time students because they're trying to manage their family life, their caring role, their work life around doing those courses as well too. So it makes about $15 million a year. Of course, we don't get all of that. We get what I would describe as a minor fraction of that to employ staff to run our courses. But overall, it makes our institution happy for it to continue. It's also been the focus of competitive research grants. I think we're up to 3 medical research future fund grants that are focused around the MOOCs in particular ways. And because we had demonstrated expertise in that area, that we leveraged that to obtain some grants and tenders from the Commonwealth Government around aged care, and about $12 million in the last few years. And more recently, we've got some funding from the Commonwealth via an organisation called Dementia Training Australia that's helped us do the updates to the MOOCs and will help us develop new MOOCs. So we're thinking about a MOOC, for example, on childhood dementia, which is an absolutely terrible condition. But overall, our goal here at the end of the day was to have what we call an ecosystem of educational offerings that was of relevance to people who were working or experiencing aged care, but in particular dementia, and really to have something for somebody, no matter what their background was or how much they wanted to learn. So at one end, there are things like MOOCs. If you like the MOOC, you might come on and do an undergraduate degree. If you like that experience, you might come on and do our postgraduate degree, etc. And now we've got these other short courses, largely they're all online, around aged care and around an area of care called respite, so dementia respite in particular, that have been quite successful. This is our one around dementia respite education and mentoring. So it's DREAM. So it has a sort of, hopefully a fairly sort of positive message there as well too. So dementia respite is a really growing area of care, and it should be. It will, hopefully, if it's done well, it will stop people having to be go from their home, for example, into residential aged care, if it's done well. So a lot of our project, which we do with Dementia Australia, is to try and upskill the staff who are involved in that area. The other one is what we call the equipped aged care learning packages. So the Commonwealth liked what we did, but they didn't want 20-hour or 10-hour MOOCs. They wanted us to do a whole suite of packages around topics in aged care, but can you make them 10 minutes? Because really that's all the time that the staff have if they've got to do it within their work time or lunchtime or after hours. So I would claim these are the most workshop pieces of education that exist probably in the universe, because we had to consult with so many organisations on each particular topic. And then beyond that, we had to refine the message so distinctly so it would fit within this 10 to 12 minute window. So it was a lot of fun. It was painful at times, but a lot of fun. And we've been doing this for a couple of years, and we've had over 40,000 or so people undertake that. But broadly, when I often talk about dementia, ideally, I would like it, and aged care, I would like it to go from a relatively de-skilled environment where people don't have adequate skills or education or knowledge to undertake their caring role to something that's a lot more sophisticated. And but there's many ways of getting there. And of course, we would like to see improvements in vet education in this area. We'd like to have, if your staff don't have any dementia education, we would like all of your staff in your residential facility to at least do the MOOC, or maybe do the MOOC together, or something like that. For the very keen ones who want to become more specialised, come and do a diploma in dementia care, or if you're looking to go into a management role, for example, or that might involve people with dementia, then maybe it's the postgraduate degree. But all of these things really should sort of fit in together. I think the last couple of slides. So where to next? We're still trying to expand reach nationally and internationally as much as possible. We've got the new version of the Understanding Dementia MOOC coming out on Monday. That might help. We're looking at doing these translations. We've already done it in Czech, Nepali and Mandarin, but we'll look at some other common languages amongst our migrant workforce and common languages of the world as well too. Again, we want to really do a MOOC on childhood dementia, not because we think we'll get lots of people doing that MOOC, but it's such an important area that really is dreadfully underserviced by our health and care systems. So we want to contribute where we can there. And we want to use our MOOCs also around dementia risk and so forth to try and expand some sort of public health program to get more people thinking about their own dementia risk and maybe making some of those important health decisions and changes so they might be at lower risk as they get older. Of course, I didn't do any of this. I like poke my head in from time to time. It was really a lot of work of a huge number of staff and different people over many years as well too, from the Wicking Centre, who really drove these outcomes. Really super grateful for people with lived experience also engaging with us and being happy to be to tell their story through the MOOCs. And then of course health professionals who come with their expert knowledge, and then some leading academic experts from Australia and across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're bang on lunchtime. Just quickly, were there any quick questions? So.
Thank you, and congratulations on everything you've achieved with these courses. With the bachelor and postgraduate degrees, are they fully online, self-paced like the MOOC? Or?
That's right, yeah. So we live in Tasmania, so we have to think very hard about what sort of courses we offer if they have a face-to-face component. And I guess we had developed some expertise on online learning and getting reach and all the rest of it through the MOOC. So we did it very much on purpose to make those degrees asynchronous as well too, but online and available. And for the undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, it's mostly Australians.
Yeah.
Just a very quick question. And building on that, how do you invite participants or those who complete to transition into that bachelor or postgraduate stream? So how do you market to them to achieve that?
Well, we thought there was some risk in doing this, but essentially if you do something with us, you end up in our content management system. And we have a very good marketing person in the centre, and she can slice and dice that in many ways, from people who have completed MOOCs or not completed MOOCs, or in particular states, or all sorts of levels of resolution there. So, but essentially we are marketing to people mostly marketing to people who've done our MOOCs or our other short courses as well. That's our principal way of doing it. We do have some marketing through trade magazines in aged care as well, and we go around the aged care conferences. Usually we have a booth at a lot of those as well.
Well, I've got one.
Sure.
What other discipline area is it natural for this that no one's doing?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Well, the other one is disability, and and clearly we've got some huge problems with the NDIS and how we execute support for people with disabilities, and a lot of people are flooding into various roles, carer roles, etc., who, well, will not have any knowledge or expertise in the condition that they see. Now, we took that to the NDIA very early on in the history of the NDIS, and because we said at least your people who are deciding on packages and amounts of money and all the rest of it, you know, maybe they should know about at least the most common things that cause disability, particularly in younger people and kids and so forth. And they weren't particularly interested at that time. So I wonder now whether they might be more interested, because you know, I think there's a lot of probably waste in the system and a lot of bad decisions are made, again, because people don't know enough about the impact of those conditions. Yeah, well, maybe, but it's been difficult. I mean, we get on very well with the Commonwealth and various politicians, but getting funding directly for these things has just been very tricky, and so we go wander around trying to find money in various different ways. And but it might, you know, it might be time to sort of to try again. And our venture, hopefully, into childhood dementia is probably the start of that, because these are, you know, in terrible conditions affect young kids who will often end up with NDI support.
Just a quick one. I guess that's my question. Why isn't the government jumping on this? I mean, you mentioned that before. If you told people you know, most people will see dementia in the loved ones, the older loved ones in their lives. If you told people the people that are looking after them don't have dementia training, it's like red flags everywhere, you know? And the cancer comparison you gave is really powerful. Why do you think?
Well, a lot of it's, yeah, well, it's one we often think about, and there's probably lots of different answers, but I'd say the first thing is ageism. We don't really care too much what happens to older people in our community, unless it's my mum or dad or your grandparents or something, and suddenly dementia's there. You know, people, and we were quite happy for a long time to have people working in residential aged care facilities who didn't know anything about dementia. So, and it wasn't until, you know, it was exploded in the public sphere that they had a Royal Commission. But even then, after the Royal Commission, there are things that have been done that have been useful, but there's not been a revolution in the quality of dementia care. And
is there much in there about workforce training in the Royal Commission?
Oh yes, heaps in there, but they unfortunately they didn't come out. They said everybody needs to have dementia training. That's fair enough. But and then there's now a revision of the Aged Care Act and of the standards, and which also says people need to have dementia training. But is that a 5-minute look at a brochure, or is it something we need to enforce in vet training, or is it something like what we do, or is it, God forbid, you know, we might get some specialist dementia carers out there, you know, in terms of the nursing staff or allied health practitioners or something. There's no detail.
But this is free and it's part-time. It's
Um,
not making sense, sorry.
No, well, no, it was never made sense to us. I mean, even from the beginning, it just doesn't make sense. You would think it's literally a no-brainer to do this, but it's because it's just hard to get change. We've been doing these things in a particular way. Even in the hospitals, things are done in the same. There might be new technology and new approaches, but they're all done in the same way as they've been doing for decades, and it's because of the way everybody's trained. So there's not as much innovation in that sector as you'd probably like.
Like help. What do I do to help my mother with dementia into an AI? What do you get?
Well, yes.
That's the question. That's like.
Oh, yes. Well, no. You get national peak bodies sometimes, and they do a great job, but you know they haven't got much money either. And our MOOC turns up now all the time, and some of those researchers. That's probably because they know it's me. The machine knows it's me, so it puts that up. And also, we're not the only ones now providing online dementia education. Now, Dementia Training Australia does a really great job, with lots of things there as well too. So there's been an explosion of things people can do, but there's no mandate. There's no mandate to do any of it really at the moment for anyone to do any, other than that somebody feels that they need to do it to do their job better.
Well done.
Great, thank you.